They say you can't miss what you never had. But let me tell you something. Waking up from a 2-month coma to find out your family bailed on you hits different. Real different. I'm Tessa Blackwood, and the day I opened my eyes in that sterile hospital room in Newark, New Jersey, I learned exactly how disposable I was to the people who were supposed to love me. The fluorescent lights burned my eyes, tubes stuck out of my R's like some twisted science experiment, and my throat felt like I'd swallowed glass. But none of that hurt as bad as the cream-colored note sitting on the table beside wilted flowers. My father's handwriting, all sharp angles and zero warmth. We stopped paying. Good luck. That's it. No, we love you. No, get well soon. Just a financial statement disguised as a goodbye. Peter Blackwood, real estate mogul, the man who owned half of Bergen County, couldn't spare the cash to keep his youngest daughter alive. I cried for an hour straight. Ugly crying, the kind that makes nurses uncomfortable. Snot everywhere, mascara I didn't even remember putting on streaking down my face. My whole body shaking so hard the monitors started beeping. A nurse came in, this tired-looking woman named Rosa who didn't say anything, just held my hand while I fell apart. She'd seen this before, I could tell. Families who ghost their sick relatives like they're bad Tinder dates. But then, Kim walked in, and everything changed. Kim Reyes wasn't just any lawyer. She was a shark in Louboutins, the kind of attorney who made corporate executives wet themselves during depositions. I'd met her exactly once before my accident, at some charity gala where my father was pretending to care about literacy or hunger or whatever tax write-off he was chasing that quarter. She'd given me her card, told me to call if I ever needed anything. I thought she was just being polite. I was wrong. She strode into that hospital room like she owned the place, her black suit probably worth more than the medical equipment keeping me alive. And behind her was a man I'd never seen before. Late 50s, silver hair, Tom Ford suit, and eyes that looked like they could calculate your net worth from across the room. Tessa, Kim said, and her grin was absolutely feral. Your father made a mistake. They forgot who you really are. I blinked at her, confused, my brain still foggy from medically induced sleep. What are you talking about? I'm nobody. I'm the screw-up daughter who couldn't even keep her car on the road. The accident was my fault. Everyone knew that. I'd been driving too fast on Route 4, singing along to some trash pop song, not paying attention. The semi came out of nowhere. Or I came out of nowhere. The details were fuzzy, buried under trauma and medication. All I knew was that I'd wrapped my Mercedes around a guardrail, and the next thing I remembered was waking up abandoned. Nobody? The man in the Tom Ford suit finally spoke, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. Miss Blackwood, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Richard Sutherland, executor of the Elizabeth Ashford estate. Elizabeth Ashford, my grandmother, my father's mother, the woman who died when I was 16, the only person in my entire family who'd ever acted like I mattered. She used to sneak me chocolate croissants and tell me stories about growing up in Manhattan before it got too expensive for regular people. She taught me French, took me to galleries in Chelsea, made me feel like I was more than just the disappointing youngest child who couldn't compete with perfect Jenna and golden boy Leo. What about her? I asked, my voice cracking. She's been dead for 6 years. Richard sat down in the chair beside my bed, crossing his legs like we were having tea at the plaza instead of talking in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Your grandmother left specific instructions in her will, instructions that were to be revealed only when you turned 25 or in the event of a life-threatening emergency. Congratulations, Miss Blackwood. You hit both triggers. Kim pulled out a folder, the kind that screams important legal documents, and set it on my lap. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely open it. Inside was a letter, written in my grandmother's perfect cursive, dated 2 weeks before she died. My dearest Tessa, it read, and I felt tears starting again just seeing her handwriting. If you're reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong, or you finally escaped Peter's shadow. Either way, it's time you knew the truth. You are not a Blackwood by blood, my darling. Your mother, God rest her soul, had an affair with a man named James Ashford, my younger brother, your great-uncle. Peter knows this. He's always known, and he's resented you for it every single day of your life. The room spun. I read the words 3 times, 4 times, trying to make them make sense. James Ashford had been some kind of tech genius back in the 90s, sold a company for an ungodly amount before the dot-com bubble burst. He died in a helicopter crash when I was 2. I barely remember him, just vague impressions of a tall man with kind eyes who let me sit on his lap and bang on his keyboard. "I don't understand," I whispered. Richard leaned forward, his expression almost sympathetic. "Your biological father, James Ashford, left his entire estate in a trust. $140 million, Miss Blackwood. Your grandmother was the trustee, with instructions to reveal the inheritance only when the time was right. She wanted to protect you from Peter's wrath." $140 million? The number was so big it didn't even sound real. I'd been eating ramen and working retail at the Short Hills Mall while sitting on a fortune that could have changed everything. "Peter knew about this?" I asked, and Kim nodded. "Oh, he knew. And so did your siblings. Well, half-siblings, technically. That's why they've treated you like garbage your whole life, Tessa. You weren't just the annoying little sister. You were the cuckoo in the nest, the living reminder that their mother strayed, and the walking threat to their inheritance." Everything clicked into place. The way Peter had always looked at me with barely concealed disgust. The way Jenna had spent our entire childhood tearing me down, calling me stupid, worthless, a waste of space. The way Lio had just ignored me, like I was furniture he'd learned to navigate around. The way none of them had visited me in the hospital after the accident. The way they'd pulled the plug on my treatment the second they thought they could get away with it. They wanted me dead. "Your grandmother was smart," Richard continued. "She structured the trust so that if you died before accessing it, the money would go to various charities, not a cent to Peter or his children. But if you survived, if you made it to 25 or experienced a qualifying emergency, the entire sum transfers to you. And there's more." He pulled out another document, this one looking even more official. Your grandmother also documented years of financial mismanagement by your father. She had evidence that Peter had been stealing from you, using your social security number to open credit cards, taking out loans in your name. She was building a case before she died. Kim has spent the last 6 years continuing that work. I looked at Kim, this woman who was basically a stranger, and she shrugged. "Your grandmother hired me a month before she passed, paid me a retainer that's kept me on this case ever since. I've been watching your family like a hawk, Tessa, documenting every shady deal, every tax dodge, every time Peter used your name to commit fraud. I've got enough to bury him." The rage that hit me was like nothing I'd ever felt before. It started in my chest, this hot, tight feeling that spread through my whole body until my fingers were tingling and my vision got sharp and clear. They'd stolen from me. They'd abused me. They'd abandoned me in a hospital to die. And now I was supposed to just take my money and walk away? Hell no! "What can we do?" I asked, and my voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. It sounded cold. Dangerous. Kim's grin got even wider. "Oh, honey, we can do everything. First, we get you out of this hospital. I've already arranged for your transfer to a private facility in Morristown, somewhere your family can't find you. Then, we start pulling threads. Peter's business empire is built on loans and leverage. He's overextended, bleeding cash, and he's been counting on a big development deal in Hoboken to save him. A deal that, coincidentally, requires permits from a zoning board that's suddenly very interested in the code violations I anonymously reported." Richard pulled out his phone, showing me a photo of a massive construction site, all steel beams and concrete.
The Meridian Tower. Luxury condos, retail space, supposed to open next spring. Your father's staked everything on it. If it falls through, the Blackwood Empire collapses like a house of cards. I stared at the image, my brain working overtime. You want me to destroy him? I want you to take what's yours, Kim corrected. The destruction is just a bonus. But here's the thing, Tessa. This isn't going to be easy. Your family will fight back. They'll try to discredit you, claim you're mentally unstable from the accident, drag your name through the mud. You need to be ready for war. I thought about Jenna, my older sister who'd spent years making me feel like I was worthless. Jenna, with her perfect blonde hair and her Princeton degree and her engagement to some hedge fund bro named Chad.
Jenna, who'd told me at our grandmother's funeral that I was a mistake, that I should have been the one who died instead. I thought about Lyle, the brother who'd never once stood up for me, who'd watched Jenna torture me and our father ignore me and done absolutely nothing. Lyle, with his law degree from Columbia and his partnership track at some white shoe firm in Manhattan. Lyle, who'd literally changed his phone number rather than deal with me calling for help after the accident. And I thought about Peter. Peter, who'd married my mother knowing she was pregnant with another man's child. Peter, who'd chosen to raise me anyway, but made sure I knew every single day that I was a burden, an obligation, a debt he'd never signed up for. Peter, who'd looked at me in my hospital bed and decided I wasn't worth the money. I'm ready, I said, and I meant it. Good, Richard said, standing up, because there's one more thing you should know. Your mother's death, the car accident when you were 12, we don't think it was an accident. The room went cold. My mother had died on the Garden State Parkway. Brake failure, they'd said. A tragic malfunction in her Range Rover. I'd been at a sleepover at a friend's house, had come home to find Peter sitting in his study, drink in hand, telling me flatly that my mother was gone. He hadn't cried, hadn't comforted me, just sent me upstairs and told me to be quiet because Jenna and Lyle would upset. What are you saying? I asked, but I already knew. Kim set a hand on my shoulder, her manicured nails sharp even through the hospital gown. I'm saying your grandmother suspected foul play, and if we're right, if Peter killed your mother to keep his perfect family intact, then we're not just talking about financial crimes anymore. We're talking about murder. The next week passed in a blur. I was transferred to the private facility in Morristown, a place that looked more like a spa than a hospital, with actual art on the walls and food that didn't taste like cardboard. Kim visited every day, bringing documents for me to review, teaching me the basics of corporate warfare. Richard handled the financial side, setting up accounts, transferring assets, making sure Peter couldn't touch a single cent of my inheritance. And I healed. Physically, at least. The doctors said I was lucky, that another week without proper treatment and I would have had permanent damage. As it was, I had some gnarly scars on my left arm and a limp I'd probably never fully shake. But I was alive, and I was pissed. Kim laid out the plan one afternoon while I was working through physical therapy, trying to get my leg to remember how to walk properly. Phase 1 is financial suffocation, she explained, sitting cross-legged on the therapy mat like we were just having a casual chat. We're going to systematically destroy every revenue stream Peter has. The Meridian Tower is the biggest target, but he's got rental properties, commercial holdings, investments that we can pick apart piece by piece. How? I asked, gritting my teeth as the therapist pushed my knee to a painful angle. You know how many shell corporations your father uses to hide assets? 14. I've got forensic accountants tracing every transaction, every transfer. We're going to expose him for the fraud he is, report him to the IRS, the SEC, anyone who will listen. By the time we're done, he will be able to get a loan to buy a Happy Meal. I laughed despite the pain. What about Jenna and Lyle? Jenna's easy. She's been living off trust funds from her mother's side of the family, but she's also been using company credit cards for personal expenses. A little anonymous tip to the board of her nonprofit job, and suddenly she's unemployable. As for Lyle, his law firm is very particular about ethics violations. It would be a shame if someone discovered he'd been helping Peter hide assets during his last divorce. The divorce. I'd almost forgotten about that.
Peter's second marriage had ended 3 years ago. A messy split with a woman named Monica, who'd lasted all of 5 years before realizing what a nightmare she'd married into. The settlement had been brutal, from what I'd heard through the family grapevine. Monica had taken him for millions. Wait, I said, a thought occurring to me. Monica? Could she help us? Kim's eyebrows raised. That's not a bad idea. She hates Peter almost as much as you do, and she might have information we don't. We tracked down Monica Chen Blackwood in Hoboken, of all places, living in a gorgeous brownstone overlooking the Hudson. She answered the door in yoga pants and a cashmere sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and when she recognized me, her eyes went wide. Tessa? Oh my God, I heard about the accident. Are you okay? It was the first time anyone from my family's orbit had asked me that, and I almost started crying right there on her doorstep. Monica invited us in, made tea, and listened while Kim explained what we were doing. When we finished, she sat back on her pristine white couch and laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. I always knew Peter was a bastard, but this is next level. Yeah, I'll help, whatever you need. She pulled out her laptop, her fingers flying over the keys. During the divorce, my lawyers got access to a lot of financial records. Peter's attorneys tried to hide stuff, but my team was better. I've got copies of everything. Offshore accounts, shell companies, communications with some very shady business partners. There's one in particular you should know about. A guy named Viktor Kozlov, Russian, into real estate development. Peter borrowed $20 million from him for the Meridian Tower. Kim and I exchanged glances. A Russian loan shark? Monica nodded. Victor's not technically mafia, but let's just say he's not the kind of guy you want to owe money to. Peter's been making payments, but barely. If the tower doesn't get finished, he's screwed. Like cement shoes screwed. This was better than I could have hoped for. Do you have proof of the loan? Better. I have the loan agreement complete with Peter's signature and terms that would make a mobster blush. The interest rate alone is criminal. Literally, New Jersey has usury laws. Kim practically bounced in her seat. If we can prove Peter entered into an illegal loan agreement, we can go to the DA. Add that to the fraud charges, and we're talking serious jail time.
Over the next few days, Monica became part of our team. She hated Peter with a passion I recognized, the kind that comes from being married to someone who makes you feel worthless. She told me stories I'd never heard, about how Peter had cheated on her constantly, how he'd gaslit her, made her think she was crazy, how he'd tried to turn her own family against her during the divorce. He's a narcissist, Monica said one evening while we were going through boxes of documents in her living room. A clinical, textbook narcissist. Everything is about him, his image, his success, and anyone who threatens that gets crushed. Like my mom, I said quietly. Monica paused, her hand on a stack of papers. Tessa, I don't know if this helps, but when Peter and I were married, he used to drink too much and talk. One night, he told me that your mother threatened to leave him, to take you, and go public about the affair. He said he couldn't let that happen, that it would have destroyed his reputation. My blood ran cold. Did he say anything else? He said he fixed it. Those were his exact words. I fixed it. At the time, I thought he meant he'd convinced her to stay. But now, knowing what I know... She didn't have to finish. We all knew what she meant. Peter had killed my mother. And he'd gotten away with it for 13 years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mom, about the funeral where I'd been so numb I couldn't even cry. I'd been 12, barely old enough to understand what death meant, and everyone had told me it was an accident, just a terrible, tragic accident. But it wasn't. Peter had murdered her. And then he'd raised me, the daughter who wasn't even his, just to maintain appearances, just to keep his perfect family image intact. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break things. I wanted to drive to his mansion in Alpine and burn it to the ground. Instead, I called Kim. She answered on the first ring, her voice alert despite it being 2 a.m. Tessa, what's wrong? I want him in prison, I said, my voice shaking. Not bankrupt, not embarrassed, in prison, for what he did to my mother.
There was a long pause, then Kim said, "That's going to be harder. It's been 13 years. Evidence is going to be tough to find, and the case was ruled an accident. We'd need something concrete, something that proves it was murder. Then we find it, whatever it takes." Kim sighed, but I could hear the determination in her voice. "Okay, I'll start digging. But Tessa, you need to be prepared. This might not end the way you want. Sometimes the bad guys win." "Not this time," I said. "I died in that hospital room, Kim. The Tessa who wanted her family to love her, who tried so hard to be good enough, she's gone. The person who woke up, she doesn't lose." And I meant every word.
The next morning, Richard called with news about the Meridian Tower. The zoning board had officially red-tagged the construction, citing multiple violations, including improper permits, environmental concerns, and questionable financial backing. Peter's lawyers were fighting it, but the delays alone were costing him a fortune. Even better, 3 of his major investors had pulled out, spooked by rumors of financial irregularities. "The walls are closing in," Richard said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. His stock portfolio took a hit yesterday, too, words getting around that Blackwood Development is in trouble. I was sitting in Monica's living room, going through another box of documents when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello?" Heavy breathing. Then, "You little bitch. Jenna." My perfect, polished older sister, and she sounded absolutely unhinged. "You're doing this. You're sabotaging Dad's company." I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. "Hi, Jenna. Nice to hear from you. How's Chad?" "Don't play dumb. I know it's you. Dad's business is falling apart, and suddenly you're alive and well. That's not a coincidence." "You're right," I said, my voice sweet as poison. "It's not. See, I woke up from my coma to find out that my loving family abandoned me to die. And then I found out some very interesting things about who I really am. Did Dad ever tell you about James Ashford?" Silence. Long, painful silence. "That's what I thought," I continued. "Must be hard, knowing your whole life is a lie. Knowing that the sister you tormented for 25 years is actually worth more than you'll ever be." "You're insane," Jenna hissed. "Dad's going to crush you. He's going to prove you're mentally incompetent, take your money and put you back in the ground where you belong." "He can try. But here's the thing, Jenna. I've got lawyers. Really good lawyers. And I've got proof of everything. The fraud, the theft, the money laundering. How do you think the board of your nonprofit is going to feel when they find out you've been embezzling?" "I haven't embezzled anything." "Haven't you? Those trips to Paris on the company card, that's embezzlement. And I've got receipts, literally." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through me, but I felt amazing, powerful. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the victim. I was the threat. Monica looked over at me impressed. "Damn, girl, you went full savage." She deserves it. They all do. But even as I said it, a small part of me, the part that remembered being 8 years old and desperately wanting Jenna to like me, felt sad. This was my family. Dysfunctional, toxic, abusive, but still my family. And I was destroying them. Kim arrived an hour later with more news. I talked to a private investigator who specializes in cold cases. He's willing to look into your mother's accident, but he needs access to the original police reports and the car.
Do you know what happened to the vehicle? I thought back. It was totaled. I think it went to a junkyard. We need to find it. If there was tampering with the brakes, there might still be evidence, even after 13 years. Metal doesn't lie. Richard, who'd come with Kim, cleared his throat. There's something else. I did some digging into Peter's finances around the time of your mother's death. 2 weeks before the accident, he took out a life insurance policy on her. $2 million. The room went silent. That's not unusual for wealthy couples, Richard continued, but the timing is suspicious. And there's more. Peter's business was in trouble back then, too. He was overextended, facing bankruptcy.
Your mother's death and the insurance payout saved him. So he killed her for money? I said flatly. We believe so, yes, but proving it is another matter. The private investigator's name was Lou Castellano, a former cop who looked exactly like you'd expect. Graying hair, coffee-stained shirt, eyes that had seen too much. He met us at a diner in Parsippany, ordered black coffee, and listened to our story without interrupting. When we finished, he leaned back and rubbed his jaw. This is going to be tough. 13 years is a long time. Memories fade, evidence disappears, people die. But I've worked miracles before. Give me 2 weeks and a retainer, and I'll see what I can find. Kim handed him a check that made his eyebrows raise. You've got 3 weeks and unlimited resources. Find me something that puts Peter Blackwood away. Lou pocketed the check and grinned. Lady, for this kind of money, I'll find you a confession written in blood. He was gone by the time our food arrived, leaving us to sit in the vinyl booth and contemplate what we'd started. Are you sure about this? Monica asked quietly. Once you open this door, there's no closing it. If Lou finds evidence that Peter killed your mother, the cops will get involved. This becomes a whole different ballgame. I picked up my fries, suddenly not hungry. She was my mom. She deserved better than to die because she married the wrong guy. If I can give her justice, even 13 years too late, I have to try. Kim nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. But Monica's right. Once we go down this road, things are going to get dangerous. Peter's already losing everything. If he finds out we're investigating him for murder, he might do something desperate. Like what? Kill me? He already tried that when he pulled my hospital funding. Actually, Richard interjected, that's something we should discuss. Your safety, I mean. Peter doesn't know about your inheritance yet. As far as he's concerned, you're just his troublemaking daughter causing problems. But once he finds out about the money, about James Ashford, he's going to lose it. We should consider protection. The idea of needing bodyguards felt surreal, like something out of a movie. But they were right. Peter was dangerous. He'd killed once. He wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Fine, I agreed. But nothing obvious. I don't want to walk around with some meathead in a suit following me everywhere. Richard made some calls, and by that evening, I had a security detail. 2 ex-military guys named Marcus and James, who dressed like normal people and kept their distance, but were always watching. It was weird at first, knowing someone was constantly monitoring me, but after a few days, I got used to it.
Marcus even made pretty good coffee. A week later, the first domino fell. The New Jersey Attorney General's office announced an investigation into Blackwood Development for tax evasion and fraud. The press release didn't name Peter specifically, but it didn't have to. Within hours, his photo was all over the news. I watched the coverage from Monica's living room, eating popcorn like it was a movie. They showed footage of Peter leaving his office building surrounded by lawyers, his face red with anger. Reporters shouted questions at him. Mr. Blackwood, did you steal from your daughter? Is it true you're connected to Russian organized crime? He didn't answer, just climbed into his Bentley and drove away. But his eyes, for just a second, looked scared. This is just the beginning, Kim said, sitting beside me on the couch. Once the AG starts digging, they're going to find everything. Peter's going down, Tessa. Jenna called again that night, but this time she was crying. Tessa, please, Dad didn't do anything wrong. You're destroying our family. He destroyed it first, I said coldly. When he killed my mom, when he stole from me, when he left me to die in that hospital. All I'm doing is returning the favor. Mom's death was an accident. You're being paranoid. Am I? Ask Dad about the life insurance policy. Ask him about the loan from Viktor Kozlov. Ask him why he's been using my identity to commit fraud for the last 10 years. Then call me paranoid. I hung up and blocked her number. I was done with Jenna, done with all of them. The only person I felt even a little bad for was Lyle. He'd been silent through all of this, hadn't called or texted or tried to contact me at all. Part of me wondered if he felt guilty, If he'd known what Peter was doing and stayed quiet because it was easier than standing up for me. But mostly, I didn't think about him at all. He'd made his choice when he changed his number. He didn't get to suddenly care now that everything was falling apart. 2 weeks after Lou started investigating, he called with news. "I found the car," he said, his voice crackling through the phone. "It's in a salvage yard in Patterson. Owner didn't want to let me see it at first, but I convinced him. Tessa, the brake line was cut. Clean slice right through the hydraulic line. This was no accident." I sat down hard on Monica's couch, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. "You're sure?" "Positive. I took photos, got samples. I've also got a mechanic willing to testify that this was deliberate. We've got him." Kim was already on her phone calling the prosecutor's office. Within an hour, we had a meeting scheduled with the AG's office for the next day. This was it. We were really doing this. That night, I dreamed about my mother. She was sitting in her garden in our old house in Bergen County, the one Peter had sold after she died. She looked younger than I remembered, happy, and she smiled when she saw me. "Mom," I said, even though I knew it was a dream. "Baby girl," she said, and her voice was exactly as I remembered it. "You're doing so good. I'm so proud of you." "I miss you," I whispered, and the tears started. "I know, honey, but you're going to be okay. You're stronger than he ever was, stronger than all of them." She stood up and walked over to me, putting her hand on my cheek. "Finish this. Make him pay. And then let it go."
Don't let rage consume you the way it consumed him. Promise me. "I promise," I said. When I woke up, my face was wet with tears, but I felt lighter. Like my mother had really been there, really given me permission to do what needed to be done. The meeting with the AG went better than we could have hoped. They listened to Lou's findings, reviewed the evidence, and agreed to reopen the investigation into my mother's death as a homicide. Within days, Peter was arrested. I watched it happen on live TV, standing in Monica's living room with Kim and Richard beside me. The cops showed up at his mansion in Alpine at 6 in the morning. Perp walked him out in handcuffs while news helicopters circled overhead. He looked old, suddenly, diminished, not the terrifying figure who'd loomed over my childhood, just a sad, angry man who'd gotten caught. Jenna and Leo were there too, standing on the front steps of the mansion looking shell-shocked. The camera zoomed in on Jenna's face, and I saw the exact moment she realized her perfect life was over. "How do you feel?" Kim asked me. I thought about it. I thought about 12-year-old me crying at my mother's funeral, about 16-year-old me listening to my grandmother's last words, about 25-year-old me waking up alone in a hospital room with a note that said, "Good luck." "I feel like I can finally breathe," I said, and it was true. The weight I'd been carrying my whole life, the feeling that I was never good enough, never wanted, never loved, it was gone. Peter's arrest was just the beginning. Over the next week, the full extent of his crimes came out. The fraud, the tax evasion, the connections to Viktor Kozlov and Russian money laundering operations, and finally the evidence that he'd murdered my mother. It was all over the news, a scandal that had everything: wealth, betrayal, murder. The tabloids had a field day. Billionaire developer killed wife for insurance money. Daughter returns from coma to expose father's crimes. The Blackwood family curse. But as the media circus raged, I stayed hidden in Monica's brownstone, watching it all unfold from a safe distance. I gave one interview to a reporter Kim trusted and told my story. About waking up alone. About discovering who I really was. About finding the courage to fight back. People I'd never met sent me messages of support, telling me I was brave, that I'd helped them find the strength to leave their own toxic families. It was overwhelming and humbling and kind of terrifying. I hadn't set out to be anyone's hero. I just wanted justice. But if my story helped someone else,
then maybe all of this pain meant something. Peter's trial was set for 6 months out, but his lawyers were already trying to negotiate a plea deal. Kim said he was looking at 25 to life if convicted of first-degree murder, plus additional time for the fraud charges. He'd die in prison. It should have felt like a victory, and it did, but it also felt sad. This man had raised me, even if he'd resented every second of it. He'd taught me to ride a bike, paid for my education, walked me through his office building when I was little, and let me pretend I was important. Those memories didn't erase what he'd done, but they didn't disappear either. "You okay?" Monica asked, finding me on her roof deck one evening, staring out at the Manhattan skyline across the Hudson. "Yeah," I said, "just thinking about how different my life is now. A month ago, I was nobody. Now I'm this." "An heiress with a vendetta?" Monica suggested, and I laughed. "Something like that." She sat down beside me, both of us wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Peter needed to be stopped, and your mother deserved justice." "Thanks," I said quietly, "for helping me, for believing me. You didn't have to do any of this." Monica shrugged. "Are you kidding? Taking down Peter Blackwood was therapeutic. Best revenge I could have asked for." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the city. Tomorrow, Kim and I were meeting with James Ashford's lawyer to finalize the inheritance transfer. Tomorrow, I'd officially become one of the wealthiest women in New Jersey. Tomorrow, my life would change again. But tonight, I was just Tessa. Just a girl who'd survived hell and come out stronger. Just a daughter who'd avenged her mother. Just a woman learning to live with the ghosts of her past and the promise of her future. "Hey, Tessa." "Yeah? What are you going to do with all that money?" I smiled, an idea already forming in my mind. "Something good. Something that would make my mom and my grandmother proud. Maybe a foundation for people escaping abusive families, or funding for coma patients whose families abandoned them. I don't know yet, but something that matters." "That's perfect," Monica said and squeezed my hand. The lights of Manhattan twinkled in the distance, and for the first time in my life, the future didn't look scary. It looked full of possibilities. But I should have known better. The Blackwoods weren't done with me yet. Not by a long shot. Because the next morning, when I walked into Richard's office to sign the inheritance papers, there was someone waiting for me I never expected to see. Lyle. My half-brother, looking gaunt and exhausted, wearing a rumpled suit and an expression I couldn't quite read. "Tessa," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. "We need to talk. There's something about Dad's arrest you don't know. Something that changes everything." I stared at Lyle across Richard's mahogany desk, every muscle in my body tense. Marcus, my security guy, had his hand inside his jacket where I knew he kept his gun, and Kim looked ready to physically throw my half-brother out the window. But something in Lyle's eyes stopped me from telling them to do it. He looked desperate, broken, nothing like the golden boy who'd ignored me my entire life. "You've got 3 minutes," I said coldly, crossing my arms. "Then Marcus escorts you out." Lyle nodded, running a hand through his hair, and I noticed it was greasy, like he hadn't showered in days. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie was missing, and there were dark circles under his eyes that made him look 10 years older. "I know you hate me," he started. "I deserve that. I was a coward. I watched Dad treat you like garbage, watched Jenna torture you, and I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my problem, that if I just kept my head down and focused on my career, everything would be fine. But it wasn't fine. Nothing was ever fine in that house." "Is there a point to this?" Kim snapped. "Because my client has important business to attend to, and your sob story isn't on the agenda." Lyle flinched, but pressed on. "The night before Mom died, I heard her and Dad fighting. I was 15, supposed to be asleep, but their voices woke me up. She was screaming at him, saying she couldn't do it anymore, couldn't pretend. She said she was taking Tessa and leaving, that she didn't care what it cost her. And Dad said..." His voice broke, and he had to stop to compose himself. "Dad said that if she tried to leave,
if she tried to take you, he'd make sure she never saw either of us again. That he'd tell everyone about the affair, destroy her reputation, take us away from her. She told him she didn't care, that anything was better than staying with him. And then 2 weeks later, she was dead. The room went silent except for the hum of Richard's desk fan. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. You knew? You knew he killed her, and you said nothing? I was 15, Lyle's voice rose, anguished. I was a kid and I was terrified. Dad sat me down after the funeral and told me that if I ever repeated what I heard, he'd make sure I ended up in foster care, that he'd disown me, destroy me, leave me with nothing. I believed him. He made me believe him. And then years passed and it got easier to pretend I'd imagined it, that it had been a normal fight, that Mom's death really was just an accident. I buried it so deep I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. Kim's expression was murderous. So you let a murderer walk free for 13 years because you were scared? Do you have any idea what that makes you? A coward. An accomplice. I know, but I'm here now. I'm willing to testify. I'll tell the prosecutors everything I heard, everything I saw. I'll help you put him away forever.
Why now? I asked. Why come forward now after all this time? Leo looked down at his hands. Because Jenna came to my apartment 3 nights ago. She was drunk, ranting about how you'd ruined everything, how we had to stop you. And she said maybe the best thing would be if you had another accident. A permanent one. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. She threatened to kill me? I said slowly. Not directly, but the implication was clear. She was talking about how easy it would be to make it look like a relapse from your injuries, how nobody would question it if you just didn't wake up one morning. And I realized that I couldn't be that person anymore. I couldn't be the guy who stands by and lets his family destroy someone else, even if that someone else hates my guts. Richard cleared his throat. If what you're saying is true, Jenna has just committed conspiracy to commit murder. We need to report this immediately. Already recording, Kim said, holding up her phone with a grim smile. Got every word. Leo, I hope you understand that you're now a witness in a capital murder case. Your life just got very complicated. Leo nodded. I know. I've already resigned from my firm. They were going to fire me anyway once the scandal really broke. My career is over, my reputation is destroyed, and my father is going to prison for the rest of his life. But maybe if I do this, if I tell the truth, I can sleep at night for the first time in 13 years. I studied him, this brother I'd never really known. He looked sincere. He looked sorry. But sincerity and sorrow didn't erase 13 years of silence. If you testify, the prosecution will grant you immunity for withholding evidence, I said carefully. But I want something else from you. Anything, Leo said immediately. I want you to publicly apologize. I want you to go on record to every media outlet that'll listen and tell them what kind of man Peter Blackwood really is. I want you to admit that you knew he killed our mother and stayed silent because you were protecting yourself. I want everyone to know exactly what this family is. Leo went pale but nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Good, I said, and turned to Kim. Set it up. And make sure his testimony is airtight. I don't want any chance of Peter wriggling out of this on a technicality. The next week was chaos. Leo's testimony hit the news like a bomb, and suddenly the case against Peter went from strong to absolutely ironclad. An eyewitness who'd heard him threaten his wife 2 weeks before her death, the prosecution was salivating. Peter's lawyers tried to discredit Leo, claimed he was lying for attention or to get back in my good graces, but the timeline matched up perfectly with everything else we'd found. The life insurance policy, the financial troubles, the cut brake line. Lou, my private investigator, even found a mechanic in Hackensack who remembered Peter bringing his wife's Range Rover in for routine maintenance the day before her death, and specifically asking to be shown how the brake system worked. The media circus intensified. Every news channel was running wall-to-wall coverage.
Legal analysts were calling it the trial of the decade. True crime podcasters were having a field day. And through it all, I stayed hidden in Monica's brownstone, watching the world tear apart the family that had torn me apart first. Jenna was arrested 2 days after Leo's testimony. The cops showed up at her townhouse in Tribeca at dawn, and she tried to run. Actually tried to flee out the back door in her Lululemon pajamas, only to find more cops waiting in the alley. The footage was everywhere. My perfect polished sister who'd spent her whole life looking down on me, being shoved into the back of a police car while her neighbors watched and filmed on their phones. It should have felt good. It didn't. It just felt sad and exhausting and like we were all stuck in some Greek tragedy where everybody loses. "How are you holding up?" Monica asked one evening, finding me on the roof deck again, my new favorite spot for thinking. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me feels vindicated, like I finally proved that I wasn't the problem. They were. But another part of me just feels empty. This is my family, you know? As toxic and abusive as they were still mine. And now they're all going to prison. Monica sat down beside me, handing me a glass of wine. "You didn't put them there, Tessa. They put themselves there with their choices. You just made sure they faced consequences." I know, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things. We sipped our wine in silence, watching the lights of Manhattan glitter across the water. It was October now, the air crisp with the promise of winter, and I'd been awake from my coma for 2 months. 2 months that felt like a lifetime. Kim told me the inheritance transfer is finalized. "You're officially a very wealthy woman. Have you thought about what you want to do?" I had, actually. I'd spent hours thinking about it, lying awake at night in Monica's guest room, staring at the ceiling and imagining all the possibilities. I want to start a foundation, something that helps people escape abusive families. Funding for legal fees, housing, therapy, medical bills, everything someone needs to get out and stay out. "That's beautiful," Monica said softly. "Your mom would be proud." I hope so. I'm also thinking about going back to school. I dropped out of Rutgers after my sophomore year because I couldn't afford it, and Dad refused to help. Maybe I'll finish my degree, study psychology or social work, actually help people instead of just throwing money at problems. Monica raised her glass. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. But even as I said it, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something wasn't right. I could feel it, the way you can sometimes feel a storm coming before you see the clouds. I found out what it was the next morning. Kim called at 7 a.m., which was never good news. "Turn on the TV," she said without preamble. "Channel 7, now." I grabbed the remote, my heart pounding, and switched on Monica's flat screen. The morning news was showing a press conference, and standing at the podium was a woman I didn't recognize. 50s, sharp suit, the kind of lawyer who charges $1,000 an hour. Behind her stood Peter. He was out on bail, looking smug and composed, nothing like the scared old man I'd seen getting arrested. "What the hell?" I breathed. The lawyer was talking, her voice smooth and confident. "My client, Peter Blackwood, is the victim of a malicious campaign orchestrated by his mentally unstable daughter and her associates. Ms. Blackwood has a documented history of emotional issues, failed suicide attempts, and drug abuse. Her claims against her father are the product of a delusional mind seeking attention and money." I almost threw the remote at the TV. Failed suicide attempts? Drug abuse? None of that was true. I'd been depressed in high school, sure. Who wasn't? And I'd tried weed a few times in college, but they were twisting everything, making me sound like some unhinged lunatic. "They're going after your credibility," Kim said, her voice tight with anger. "Peter's legal team is playing dirty. They've already filed motions to have Leo's testimony thrown out, claiming he's colluding with you. And they're requesting a psychological evaluation for you, trying to prove you're not competent to manage your own affairs." "Can they do that?" I asked, my voice shaking. "They can try. Whether they'll succeed is another matter.
But Tessa, this is about to get ugly. They're going to dig up every mistake you've ever made, every embarrassing moment, every vulnerability, and parade it in front of the media. You need to be prepared. I sat down hard on the couch, feeling like the walls were closing in. This was exactly what Kim had warned me about. Peter was fighting back, and he was fighting dirty. Over the next few days, it got worse. Stories started appearing in the tabloids, sources close to the family, claiming I'd been difficult and violent as a child. Photos of me from high school looking awkward and depressed, with captions speculating about my mental health. An interview with a girl I'd been friends with sophomore year of college who claimed I'd stolen from her and lied compulsively. None of it was true, or at least not true in the way they were presenting it. The girl from college? I'd borrowed $20 from her once and forgotten to pay her back. Hardly the crime of the century. But the media didn't care about context. They cared about clicks and views and the sensational headlines. Blackwood heiress's dark past revealed. Friends say Tessa Blackwood was always troubled. Is the Coma victim actually the real villain? I stopped reading the news. Stopped looking at social media. But I couldn't escape it completely. People recognized me when I went outside, and not all of them were supportive anymore. Some looked at me with suspicion, like maybe I really was crazy. Maybe I really had made the whole thing up. This is psychological warfare, Kim explained during an emergency meeting at Richard's office. Peter's trying to break you, make you look so unstable that nobody will believe your version of events. We need to fight back. How? I asked, feeling defeated. We hold our own press conference. We present evidence of Peter's crimes in a way the public can't ignore. And we have you sit down for a long-form interview with someone credible, someone who can give you the space to tell your story properly. Richard nodded. I'd also suggest we leak some information about Peter's connection to Viktor Kozlov. Nothing the prosecution needs for their case, but enough to remind everyone that Peter isn't some innocent victim. He's a criminal with ties to Russian money laundering operations. Do it. All of it. I'm done playing defense. The press conference was scheduled for the following Monday at a hotel in downtown Newark. Kim, Richard, and Monica spent the weekend prepping me, running through questions I might get asked, teaching me how to stay calm and composed, even when reporters were trying to bait me into saying something stupid. Remember, Kim coached, you're not angry. You're disappointed. You're hurt. You're a daughter who loved her family and was betrayed by them. Don't give them the unhinged narrative they want. Give them sympathy and strength. The morning of the press conference, I stood in front of Monica's bathroom mirror, barely recognizing myself. I'd lost weight during the coma and its aftermath. My cheekbones were sharper, my eyes harder. I looked older, tougher, like someone who'd been through hell and survived. Monica appeared in the doorway, holding a navy blue dress. Wear this. It's professional, but not cold. You want to look like someone they can trust. I changed, let Monica do my makeup, kept it natural, nothing too dramatic. We were going for girl next door who'd been wronged, not femme fatale seeking revenge. The hotel conference room was packed. Cameras everywhere, reporters jostling for position, the air thick with anticipation. I walked in with Kim and Richard flanking me, and the room went silent. I sat down at the table, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly into the cameras. My name is Tessa Blackwood, I began, my voice steady. 2 months ago, I woke up from a coma to find that my family had abandoned me. I woke up to a note from my father telling me he'd stopped paying for my medical care. And then I learned the truth about who I really am and what my family had done to me. I told my story. All of it. The abuse. The discovery of my real parentage, the inheritance, the evidence we'd found of Peter's crimes, Lyle's testimony about the night before my mother's death. I spoke for 20 minutes straight, and by the end, half the room was in tears. Then came the questions. A reporter from the New York Times. Miss Blackwood, your father's lawyers claim you're mentally unstable. How do you respond to that? I looked directly at the camera. I've been through trauma. I've struggled with depression. But that doesn't make me crazy, and it doesn't make me a liar.
I have documentation of everything I've claimed. Police reports, financial records, testimony from multiple witnesses. If I'm so unstable, why is the Attorney General's office prosecuting my father? Why did they reopen my mother's death as a homicide? A woman from CNN, what do you say to people who think this is just about money? This was never about money, and I meant it. I would give every cent back if it meant my mother was still alive, if it meant I'd grown up in a family that loved me instead of resented me. But I can't change the past. All I can do is make sure the people responsible face justice. A guy from Fox News. Your sister Jenna has been arrested for conspiracy to commit murder. Do you really believe she would have tried to kill you? I paused, choosing my words carefully. I believe Jenna is a product of our father's influence. He taught her that I was less than human, that I was a problem to be eliminated. Did she mean it when she talked about me having an accident? I don't know. But I couldn't take that chance. The questions kept coming, and I answered each one as honestly as I could. By the time it was over, I was exhausted, but I could feel the tide turning. The reporters looked convinced. The cameras had caught every moment of genuine emotion on my face. We'd won this round. The interview Kim had arranged was with a journalist named Sarah Chen, who did long-form pieces for a major magazine. We met at Monica's brownstone the next day, just Sarah and a photographer, and spent 4 hours talking.
Sarah was good at her job. She asked tough questions, but fair ones, and she seemed genuinely interested in understanding what had happened, rather than just getting salacious quotes. "What's the hardest part of all this?" she asked at one point. I thought about it. Realizing that the people who are supposed to protect me were actually my biggest threats. That's a betrayal that cuts deeper than anything else. Do you think you'll ever have a relationship with your siblings again? With Jenna, no. She's made her choices. With Lyle, maybe. He's trying to do the right thing now, even though it's late. That counts for something. What about forgiveness? Do you think you'll ever forgive your father? I shook my head. Forgiveness is for people who are sorry. Peter's not sorry for what he did. He's only sorry he got caught. You can't forgive someone who doesn't believe they did anything wrong. The article came out 2 weeks later, and it was everything we could have hoped for. Sarah had painted me as a survivor, a woman who'd fought back against impossible odds and won. The public response was overwhelmingly positive. Suddenly, I wasn't the unstable daughter anymore. I was a hero again. Peter's legal team tried to do damage control, but it was too late. The narrative had shifted, and no amount of PR could shift it back. The trial date was set for January, 3 months away. Kim said we had an open and shut case, that Peter would be convicted on multiple counts and spend the rest of his life in prison. Jenna's trial was scheduled for February, and prosecutors were confident they could prove conspiracy to commit murder. In the meantime, I had my inheritance, my freedom, and Monica's brownstone to hide in while the media circus continued. I started planning my foundation, meeting with lawyers and accountants to set up the structure. I reached out to organizations that help domestic violence survivors, talked to therapists who specialized in family trauma, read everything I could about effective intervention strategies. It felt good to focus on something positive, something that could actually help people instead of just destroying my enemies. One afternoon in mid-November, I was working on foundation paperwork when my phone rang. Unknown number again. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Tessa, it's Lyle. I hadn't talked to him since that day in Richard's office. What do you want? I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I thought you should know. Dad's been trying to contact me from jail. He wants to make a deal. I sat up straight. What kind of deal? He says he'll plead guilty to manslaughter instead of first-degree murder, take a reduced sentence. In exchange, he wants you to publicly state that you forgive him, that you believe it was a crime of passion, not premeditated. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. He must be desperate. He is. The evidence is overwhelming. His lawyers know he's going to lose at trial. This is his Hail Mary, trying to salvage some dignity before he goes down.
What did you tell him? I asked. I told him to screw himself. But Tessa, he's not going to stop. He's going to keep trying to manipulate people, to twist things in his favor.
You need to be ready for whatever he throws at you next. I'm ready, I said. I've been ready since the day I woke up. After I hung up, I called Kim and told her about Peter's offer. She snorted. The man has brass balls, I'll give him that. Murdering his wife and then asking the daughter he tried to kill to forgive him publicly? That's next-level narcissism. Are we going to respond? Hell no! Let him stew. The prosecution's case is solid. We don't need to give him anything. Thanksgiving came and went. Monica invited me to her family's gathering in Queens, and I went, grateful to spend the holiday with people who actually liked me. Her parents were sweet, her siblings were welcoming, and for a few hours I got to pretend I was just a normal 25-year-old woman eating turkey and watching football instead of the center of the biggest scandal in New Jersey. December arrived with the first snow, and the city transformed into something out of a postcard. Monica and I went ice skating at Bryant Park, bundled up in coats and scarves, laughing like teenagers. For a moment, I felt almost happy, almost normal. But that night, everything changed. I was back at the brownstone, making hot chocolate in Monica's kitchen, when Marcus burst in through the front door, his face pale. "We need to leave. Now." "What? Why?" I asked, my heart suddenly pounding. "Viktor Kozlov just posted your bail. Peter's out of jail." The world tilted. Kim had warned me this might happen, that Peter's Russian connections might try to help him, but I hadn't really believed it. Now he was out there, somewhere, free to come after me. "Where's Monica?" I asked, my voice shaking. "She went to meet her sister for dinner. I already called her, told her not to come back here. James is with her." Marcus grabbed my arm, steering me toward the door. "We have a safe house in Edison. You're going there until we figure out what Kozlov's angle is." "What about the trial?" "Still happening. But Peter's clearly desperate if he's calling in favors from Russian mobsters. We need to keep you alive until January." The safe house was a nondescript ranch in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place nobody would look twice at. Marcus and James took turns on watch, and I spent my days pacing like a caged animal, waiting for news. Kim called every day with updates. Peter was being monitored by the FBI now, since his connection to Kozlov had triggered a whole separate investigation into organized crime. He couldn't sneeze without federal agents knowing about it. But that didn't make me feel safe, because men like Peter Blackwood didn't need to get their hands dirty. They had people who did that for them. A week before Christmas, Lou called with information that made my blood run cold. "I've been digging into Kozlov's organization," he said. "Turns out, one of his guys is a specialist. Ex-KGB, trained in making deaths look like accidents. If Peter hired him, you need to be very, very careful." "Great," I said weakly. "That's just great." "I've alerted the FBI. They're taking it seriously. But Tessa, this guy is a ghost. If he's coming for you, we might not see him until it's too late." That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like an assassin. Marcus and James were on high alert, but I could see the strain on their faces. We couldn't live like this forever. Something had to give. The break came 2 days later. The FBI arrested Viktor Kozlov on money laundering charges, and Peter's bail was revoked. He was back in jail, and this time there was no getting out. The relief I felt was so intense I actually cried, ugly sobbing while Marcus patted my shoulder awkwardly and promised me it was over. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because on Christmas Eve, I got a call from the hospital in Newark. The same hospital where I'd woken up from my coma. The same hospital that held so many terrible memories. The nurse on the line sounded hesitant. "Miss Blackwood? I'm calling because we have a patient here who's asking for you. She says it's urgent." "Who?" I asked, confused. "Jenna Blackwood, your sister. She's in critical condition." My first instinct was to hang up, to let Jenna face whatever consequences she'd brought on herself without my help. But curiosity got the better of me. What happened to her? "She attempted suicide,"
Overdose. She's stable now, but she's asking for you. She says she needs to tell you something before the trial. I looked at Marcus, who was shaking his head vigorously. Going to that hospital was a risk. But I had to know. I had to hear what Jenna wanted to say. "I'll be there in an hour," I said, and hung up before Marcus could argue. The drive to Newark felt surreal, like I was going back in time, to the moment this all started. The hospital looked the same, smelled the same, felt the same, but I was different. I wasn't the scared, abandoned girl anymore. I was Tessa Blackwood, the woman who'd taken on her entire family and won. Jenna was in a private room on the 4th floor, hooked up to monitors and IVs, looking small and fragile in the hospital bed. Her blonde hair was lank, her face was sallow, and when she saw me, she started crying. "Tessa, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, not willing to come any closer. "Why am I here, Jenna?" "Because I need to tell you the truth. About everything. Before it's too late." She struggled to sit up, wincing in pain. "Dad didn't just kill your mom. He killed mine, too." The room went silent, except for the beep of the heart monitor. "What?" I breathed. Jenna's tears were flowing freely now, her whole body shaking. "My mother, Dad's first wife, she didn't die of cancer. Dad poisoned her, slowly, over months, made it look like she was just getting sicker. I was 8 years old, and I watched him do it. I watched him give her pills that made her worse instead of better. And when she finally died, he told me that if I ever said anything, he'd hurt Lyle. He'd make sure my little brother disappeared. So I stayed quiet. I buried it. And I became the daughter he wanted, the perfect, obedient daughter who never questioned anything." I felt like the floor was dropping out from under me. Peter hadn't just killed one wife. He'd killed 2. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I'm done," Jenna said simply. "I'm done protecting him. I'm done living with the secret. And I'm done being the person he made me. I tried to kill myself because I couldn't face another day of being a monster. But I failed at that too. So instead, I'm going..."
He looked back at me, realization dawning, and for just a second I saw something like respect in his eyes. Then he raised his gun, and the FBI opened fire. I closed my eyes against the sound, against the sight of my father's body hitting the pavement. When I opened them again, he was lying in a pool of blood, very dead, very gone. It was over. Peter Blackwood was dead. The trial would still happen for the other charges, but the main villain of this story was finished. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. So incredibly tired. The EMTs arrived, pulled me from the wrecked car, loaded me onto a stretcher. As they wheeled me back into the hospital, back into the place where this whole nightmare had begun, I thought about my mother, about my grandmother, about every woman who'd been destroyed by Peter's need for control. "We got him, Mom," I whispered to the ceiling as the fluorescent lights passed overhead. "He's never going to hurt anyone again." And then, for the second time in 3 months, everything went black. But this time I wasn't afraid, because this time I knew I'd wake up. And when I did, I'd finally be free. I woke up to the sound of machines beeping and someone holding my hand. For a terrifying second, I thought I was back in the coma, back at the beginning of this nightmare. But then I heard Monica's voice. "She's waking up. Tessa, Eddie, can you hear me?" I opened my eyes slowly, wincing at the bright lights. I was in a hospital room, again, but this one was different. Nicer. Private. And Monica was there, her face streaked with tears, smiling down at me like I'd just performed a miracle. "Welcome back," she said softly. "You scared the hell out of us." My throat was dry, my head pounded, and my whole body felt like one giant bruise. But I was alive. "Peter?" I croaked. "Dead," Kim said from somewhere to my left. "Very, very dead," The FBI put 17 bullets in him. He didn't suffer, but honestly, I wish he had. I turned my head and saw Kim sitting in a chair by the window, looking exhausted but satisfied. Richard was there too, along with Marcus, who had a bandage around his head, but otherwise seemed okay. "What happened?" I asked. "You've been out for 2 days," Monica explained. "You had a concussion from the crash, some bruised ribs, a lot of cuts and scrapes. The doctors wanted to keep you sedated while the swelling in your brain went down, but you're going to be fine." 2 days. I'd lost 2 more days to unconsciousness, but this time, at least I'd chosen to wake up. Over the next few hours, Kim filled me in on everything I'd missed. Peter's death had been ruled a justifiable homicide. The FBI had released footage from their body cameras showing Peter raising his weapon at federal agents, giving them no choice but to fire. The media was having a field day with it. Billionaire developer killed in FBI shootout. The Blackwood saga ends in blood. Justice for the Blackwood wives. Public opinion was overwhelmingly on my side. Peter had died a villain, and I'd emerged as the survivor who'd taken down a killer. It should have felt like victory, and part of it did. But another part of me just felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that a man who could have chosen to be better had instead chosen violence and death. What about Jenna? Still in the hospital, still planning to
Testified against Peter for her mother's murder. With him dead, the trial's been canceled. But prosecutors are using her testimony as part of the official record. Your mother's death has been officially ruled a homicide, by the way. The case is closed and her name has been cleared. Everyone knows now that she was trying to stop Peter, that she died a hero. That made me smile, despite everything. My mother's legacy was safe. She wasn't just the woman who'd had an affair and died in a tragic accident. She was the woman who'd tried to save others and paid the ultimate price. "And Lio?" I asked. "He's been calling nonstop. Wants to know if you're okay, if there's anything he can do. I think he genuinely feels terrible about everything." I thought about my half-brother, about his testimony, about the way he'd looked when he'd come to Richard's office. He'd been a coward for 13 years, but he'd found his courage in the end. That had to count for something. "Tell him I'll talk to him when I'm ready," I said, "but not yet." I was released from the hospital 3 days later, 2 days before Christmas. Monica took me back to her brownstone, which felt more like home than anywhere I'd ever lived. We spent Christmas Day on the couch watching terrible movies and eating Chinese takeout, and it was perfect. Exactly what I needed. On New Year's Eve, Kim came over with champagne and legal documents. "Your foundation is officially registered," she announced. "The Ashford Blackwood Foundation for Family Justice. We've got the initial funding in place, and I've been contacted by 3 different organizations that want to partner with you. You're about to do some real good, Tessa." I raised my glass. "To justice. And to second chances. To kicking toxic families to the curb," Monica added, and we all laughed. As the clock struck midnight and fireworks erupted over Manhattan, I stood on Monica's roof deck and thought about how far I'd come. A year ago, I'd been nobody. The forgotten daughter, the screw-up, the burden. Now, I was a survivor, an advocate, a woman with the resources and determination to actually make a difference. The first month of the new year was a whirlwind. I hired staff for the foundation, set up an office in downtown Newark, and started reaching out to people who needed help. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people contacted us, sharing stories of abuse and neglect and families that had destroyed them. Each story broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. I helped a woman escape her controlling parents who'd been stealing her disability checks. I paid for a young man's medical bills after his family abandoned him when he came out as gay. I funded legal battles for custody rights, restraining orders, and financial independence. It wasn't enough to undo all the damage that families like mine could do, but it was something. And something was better than nothing. In February, I finally sat down with Lio. We met at a coffee shop in Hoboken, neutral territory, and spent 2 hours talking. He looked better than the last time I'd seen him, healthier, less haunted. "I've been in therapy," he told me, "trying to work through everything. My therapist says I've got PTSD from growing up in that house, that the way Dad manipulated us was its own form of abuse." "It was," I agreed. "We were all his victims, Lio. Some of us just got it worse than others." "I'm so sorry, Tessa, for everything, for staying silent, for not protecting you, for being too scared to do the right thing. I know I can't fix it, but
I want you to know that I see you now. I see what you went through, and I see how strong you had to be to survive it.
I looked at this man, who was my brother by nothing but circumstance, and I made a choice. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger is killing me. I can't spend the rest of my life hating people. It's exhausting. Leo's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That means more than you know. But, I continued, forgiveness doesn't mean we're going to be close. It doesn't mean we're suddenly going to have some fairy tale sibling relationship. It just means I'm letting go of the grudge. What we build from here, if anything, is up to both of us. That's fair, Leo said. More than fair. Can I ask you something? Sure. What are you going to do with your life now? You've got the foundation, which is amazing, but what about you? What about Tessa the person, not Tessa the survivor or Tessa the activist? I smiled. I'm going back to school. I enrolled at Rutgers for the spring semester, psychology major. I figure if I'm going to help people heal from family trauma, I should actually know what I'm talking about. That's perfect, Leo said. You're going to be amazing at it. We talked for a while longer, touching up on mundane things, avoiding the heavy topics. When we parted ways, it wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. It was just two people who shared a complicated past, trying to figure out if they had any kind of future. Jenna was released from the hospital in March and immediately entered a long-term psychiatric facility. She'd pled guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and received a reduced sentence in exchange for her testimony about our father. 5 years, with the possibility of parole after 3. She wrote me a letter from the facility. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won again. Dear Tessa, it began. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I want you to know that I'm working on becoming a better person. I'm in therapy, I'm on medication, and I'm finally starting to understand how damaged I was by Dad's manipulation. He taught me that love was conditional, that I had to be perfect to deserve anything, and he taught me that you were the enemy. I believed him because it was easier than admitting that the person I was trying so hard to please was a monster. I'm not making excuses. What I did was unforgivable. But I hope that someday, years from now, you'll be able to look at me and see someone who's trying to do better, who's trying to be worthy of the second chance I don't deserve. I hope your foundation helps people the way it would have helped me if it had existed when I was young. I hope you find happiness, and I hope that someday you can think of me without hatred. That's all I can ask for. Jenna. I read the letter 3 times, trying to figure out how I felt. Jenna had been my tormentor for most of my life. She'd made me feel worthless, unwanted, less than human. But she'd also been a victim, twisted and shaped by a narcissistic father into something cruel. Could people like her change? I didn't know, but I hoped so. For her sake and for everyone else who'd been damaged by Peter Blackwood's legacy. I wrote back. Nothing long, nothing warm, just, I believe in second chances. Don't waste yours. It was enough. In April, I attended my first day of classes at Rutgers. I was older than most of the other students, and I definitely had more life experience. But it felt good to be learning again, to be building towards something. Professor Martinez's intro to psychology class was exactly what I needed.
We talked about trauma, about resilience, about the ways people survive impossible situations. And when the professor asked if anyone wanted to share a personal experience with trauma, I raised my hand. I told my story. Not all of it, just the broad strokes. A family that had hurt me. A coma that had changed everything. A fight for justice that had ended in tragedy and triumph. The class was silent when I finished. Then a girl in the back row raised her hand. How did you do it? How did you survive that and still be okay? I thought about it. I'm not sure I am okay, I admitted. I'm healing. I'm working on it.
But survival isn't about being okay. It's about deciding that the people who hurt you don't get to win. It's about taking back your power and using it to build something better. The girl nodded, tears in her eyes, and I knew I'd said the right thing. After class, she came up to me. "My dad's like yours," she said quietly. "Controlling, manipulative. I've been trying to get away from him for years, but I don't have the money and I don't know where to start." I pulled out my phone and gave her the foundation's number. "Call them. Tell them Tessa sent you. We'll help." She hugged me, this stranger who was also a sister in survival, and I felt something shift in my chest. This was why I'd fought so hard. Not just for me, but for everyone else who needed someone to believe them, to help them, to show them that escape was possible. The semester flew by. I aced my classes, made friends, and started to feel like a regular person instead of a walking tabloid headline. The media had mostly moved on to other scandals, though occasionally a reporter would track me down for a "Where are they now" piece. I gave a few interviews, always emphasizing the foundation's work, always trying to shift the focus from my personal drama to the bigger issue of family abuse and neglect. In May, Monica announced that she was selling the brownstone and moving to California. She said, "I need a fresh start. Too many memories in New Jersey, too much history. But Tessa, you've been the best roommate I could have asked for. You reminded me that it's possible to survive a Blackwood and come out stronger." I was sad to see her go, but I understood. Sometimes you have to leave everything behind to really heal. I moved into my own apartment in New Brunswick, close to campus, and learned what it was like to live alone, to be responsible only for myself, to wake up in the morning and not have to check if my family had tried to destroy me overnight. It was peaceful. Lonely sometimes, but peaceful. The foundation continued to grow. By summer, we'd helped over 200 people escape abusive situations. We'd funded therapy, legal battles, relocations, and medical care. We'd saved lives. The Ashford Blackwood Foundation was making a real difference, and every time I read a thank you letter from someone we'd helped, I thought about my mother and my grandmother and hoped they'd be proud. In July, I got a call from the New Jersey Attorney General's office. They wanted to give me an award for my advocacy work and my courage in bringing Peter to justice. The ceremony was scheduled for August, and they wanted me to give a speech. I almost said no. I didn't need recognition or awards. I just needed to do the work. But then I thought about all the people who were still trapped in situations like mine. People who needed to hear that escape was possible, that survival was possible. So I said yes.
The ceremony was held at the State House in Trenton, and the room was packed with politicians, activists, journalists, and survivors. I wore a simple black dress, nothing too fancy, and tried to calm my nerves as I waited backstage for my turn to speak. When they called my name, I walked out to thunderous applause. The award was a plaque with my name and some inspirational words about courage and justice. But the real moment came when I stepped up to the podium and looked out at all those faces. "My name is Tessa Blackwood," I began, "and I'm a survivor of family abuse. For most of my life, I thought the problem was me. I thought if I could just be better, smarter, quieter, more lovable, then my family would accept me. But the truth is, nothing I did would have been enough, because the problem was never me. It was them. I talked about my mother, about my grandmother, about the women who tried to protect me and paid the price. I talked about the inheritance that had given me the resources to fight back, and the lawyers and investigators who'd helped me find justice. And then I talked about what came next. Surviving is the first step, I said, but it can't be the only step. We have to use our survival to build something better, to help others who are still trapped, to change the systems that allow abuse to flourish. That's why I started the Ashford Blackwood Foundation, and that's why I'm asking all of you to join me in this fight. The applause when I finished was deafening. People stood up, strangers with tears in their eyes, and I realized that my story had become bigger than just me. It had become a symbol, a reminder that even the most powerless person can find strength, can fight back, can win. After the ceremony, dozens of people came up to me to share their own stories. A man whose parents had disowned him for being transgender. A woman whose husband had isolated her from everyone she loved. A teenager whose family had thrown him out for refusing to follow their religion. Each story broke my heart and fueled my determination. This was the work. This was what mattered. In September, I started my sophomore year at Rutgers. I declared a double major in psychology and social work, and I was taking classes on trauma-informed care, family systems theory, and legal advocacy. Everything I learned, I tried to apply to the foundation. We started offering free legal clinics. We partnered with therapists who specialized in family trauma. We created a hotline for people who needed help escaping dangerous situations. The foundation became my life's work, and I loved it. One October evening, I was working late at the foundation office when Lyle called. "Hey," he said, "I know we're not close, but I wanted to let you know that I'm getting married. Her name is Rachel. She's a teacher, and she's amazing. I'd like you to come to the wedding. No pressure, but it would mean a lot." I was surprised. Lyle was building a life, moving forward, creating something good out of the ashes of our past. "I'll be there." "And Lyle, I'm happy for you." "Thanks, Tessa."
That means everything. The wedding was in November. A small ceremony at a vineyard in the Finger Lakes. Lyle looked genuinely happy, and Rachel was warm and kind and exactly the sort of person who could help someone heal from a traumatic past. During the reception, Lyle pulled me aside. "I've been thinking a lot about family," he said. "About what it means, about how we define it. And I realized that the family we're born into doesn't have to be the family we keep. We get to choose who we let into our lives, who we trust, who we love." "That's true," I agreed. "And I want you to know that if you want to be part of my family, my real family, the one I'm building with Rachel, you're welcome. No obligations, no pressure, just an open invitation." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I'd like that," I said. "I'd like that a lot." We hugged, and it felt real. Like maybe we could actually build something good out of all this pain. Like maybe the Blackwood legacy didn't have to be all darkness and destruction. As the year drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. 2 years ago, I'd been nobody. A girl in a coma, abandoned by my family, left to die. Now I was Tessa Ashford Blackwood, founder of a major advocacy organization, a college student, a survivor who'd turned her pain into purpose. I thought about my mother, who'd tried to protect me and died for it. About my grandmother, who'd given me the tools to fight back. About Lou and Kim and Richard and Marcus, who'd helped me win. About Monica, who'd given me a safe place to heal. About Lyle, who'd found his courage too late but was trying to make amends. And yes, even about Jenna and Peter, the people who'd hurt me, who'd shaped me, who'd made me who I was today. I didn't forgive Peter. I never would. He'd killed 2 women and tried to kill a 3rd. He'd destroyed lives and felt no remorse. The world was better off without him. But I could acknowledge that his evil had, in a twisted way, made me stronger, had forced me to fight, to survive, to become someone who could help others. On New Year's Eve, I stood on the roof of my apartment building watching fireworks explode over New Brunswick and made a resolution. This year, I said out loud to the cold winter air, I'm going to focus on joy, not just survival, not just justice, but actual happiness. I'm going to live, not just exist. And I did. I dated for the first time in years. Nothing serious, just learning what it felt like to be with someone who treated me with respect. I traveled, taking a spring break trip to Ireland to visit my grandmother's homeland. I made real friends, people who knew my story, but didn't define me by it. I even reconciled with some of my mother's family, cousins and aunts I hadn't seen since the funeral, and learned about the woman she'd been before Peter had destroyed her. She'd been an artist, a painter. I'd never known that. Peter had thrown out all her work after she died, erased every trace of her creativity. But her sister had kept some pieces, and she gave them to me. Beautiful landscapes, portraits of me as a child, abstract works full of color and emotion. I hung them in my apartment and felt like I was finally getting to know my mother, the woman, not just the victim. In March, the foundation received a major grant from a national organization dedicated to ending family violence. $1 million, earmarked for expanding our services.
We hired more staff, opened a second office in Paterson, and started a mentorship program pairing survivors with people who'd successfully escaped abusive families. The program was my idea based on something Monica had said about how much it had helped her to talk to other people who understood what she'd been through. Survivors helping survivors. It was the whole point. By the time I turned 27, the foundation had helped over 1,000 people. 1,000 lives changed. 1,000 people who now had hope. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. And something was everything. One warm evening in May, I was sitting on my apartment balcony, grading papers for a class I was TAing, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but old habits die hard. Hello? Tessa, it's Jenna. I hadn't heard from her in over a year, not since my brief reply to her letter. What's up? I asked cautiously. I am being released next week. 3 years with time served and good behavior. I'm getting out. Congratulations, I said, and I meant it. Thank you. And Tessa, I know I don't have any right to ask this, but I was wondering if maybe we could meet. For coffee or something. I want to show you that I'm different now, that I'm trying to be better. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep that door closed forever, but another part of me, the part that ran a foundation dedicated to second chances, knew I had to practice what I preached. Okay, I said. Coffee. 1 hour. And Jenna, if you pull any of your old games, we're done. For good. I won't, she promised. I swear. We met the following week at a Starbucks in Princeton. Jenna looked different. Older, obviously, but also softer. Less polished. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup. She looked like a regular person, not the ice queen who'd terrorized my childhood. Hi, she said nervously. Hi, I replied, sitting down across from her. For a few minutes, we just drank our coffee in awkward silence. Then Jenna spoke. I'm living in a halfway house in Newark. I'm working at a nonprofit that helps formerly incarcerated women find employment. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. And I'm still in therapy 3 times a week. My therapist says I'm making progress. That's good, I said. I'm glad you're doing better. Tessa, I need you to know that I remember everything. Every cruel thing I said to you, every time I made you feel small, every moment I chose Dad's approval over your well-being. And I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. I can't take any of it back, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it. I looked at this woman who'd been my nightmare for so long, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. Real change. I believe you, I said, and I appreciate the apology. But Jenna, I need you to understand that we're never going to be close. Too much has happened. But I can be civil. I can acknowledge that you're trying. That's the best I can offer. That's more than I deserve, Jenna said, with tears in her eyes. Thank you. We talked for another 30 minutes, catching up on neutral topics. She told me about her job, about the women she was helping. I told her about the foundation, about school. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile. It was 2 people who shared a terrible past, trying to figure out how to exist in the same world. As I drove home that evening, I thought about forgiveness, about what it meant, what it required, what it cost. I'd forgiven Leo because he'd stood up when it mattered. I was willing to give Jenna a chance because she was genuinely trying to change. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending the past hadn't happened. It just meant choosing not to let bitterness consume me, choosing to believe that people could grow, could change, could become better than they'd been.
That summer, I graduated from Rutgers with my bachelor's degree. Leo and Rachel came to the ceremony, as did Kim and Richard and Lou. Monica flew in from California. Even Jenna showed up, standing in the back, not approaching, but just being present. As I walked across that stage and accepted my diploma, I thought about all the versions of myself who'd led to this moment. The scared little girl who'd never felt good enough, the teenager mourning her mother, the young woman in a coma abandoned by everyone, the survivor who'd fought back, the advocate who'd turned pain into purpose. They were all me, all part of my story.
I started graduate school that fall, pursuing a master's in social work with a focus on family systems and trauma. I was 27 years old, financially independent, surrounded by people who loved me, and doing work that mattered. For the first time in my life, I was happy. Really, truly happy. Not just surviving, not just getting by, actually thriving. The foundation continued to grow. We opened a third office, started offering specialized services for LGBTQ youth disowned by their families, launched a scholarship program for survivors of family abuse who wanted to go to college. Every life we touched, every person we helped, felt like a tribute to my mother and grandmother. Like I was carrying on their legacy of trying to protect people, trying to make the world a little bit safer. One December evening, as I was locking up the foundation office for the night, I noticed a young woman standing outside. She was maybe 19, 20, with a black eye and a desperate look on her face. "Are you Tessa Blackwood?" she asked. "I am," I said. "I need help," she whispered. "My family, I can't. I need to get away." I recognized that look, that desperation. I'd worn it myself once. "Come inside," I said gently. "Let's talk." We went back into the office, and I made her tea, and she told me her story. It was different from mine in the details, but the same in the ways that mattered. A family that hurt her, a need to escape, a terror of what would happen if she tried. "Here's what we're going to do," I said when she finished. "First, we're going to get you somewhere safe tonight. I have connections with domestic violence shelters. Then tomorrow, we're going to start building your exit strategy. Legal support, financial assistance, housing, therapy, whatever you need to get out and stay out." She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." I smiled. Because someone helped me once, and because nobody should have to face their family alone. That night, after I'd gotten her set up at a shelter and driven home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony. The stars were out, bright and clear in the winter sky, and I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This was my life now, helping people escape the same hell I'd survived, using my pain to prevent others from suffering, turning my family's legacy of destruction into something beautiful and healing. I thought about Peter, rotting in the ground, his empire destroyed, his crimes exposed. I thought about my mother, finally at peace, her name cleared and her courage recognized. I thought about my grandmother, whose foresight and planning had given me the tools to fight back. And I thought about myself, Tessa Ashford Blackwood, survivor, advocate, graduate student, founder, friend, daughter, woman. I'd woken up from a coma to an empty room and a note that said, "Good luck." And I'd taken that luck and made it into something powerful, something purposeful, something that mattered. The Blackwood name would always carry darkness, but the Ashford name, my true name, would carry light. And in the end, that's what mattered. Not revenge, not bitterness, not hatred, but the simple, radical act of surviving and then helping others survive too. I raised my glass to the stars. "This one's for you, Mom," I said. We won. And for the first time since she died, I felt like she could hear me, like she was proud, like everything I'd gone through, all the pain and struggle and fight, had been worth it. Because I'd made it. I survived, and I was using that survival to make sure others could do the same. That was justice. That was healing. That was enough. The family you're born into doesn't define you. Real strength isn't about revenge. It's about breaking cycles of abuse and using your pain to help others heal. Survival alone isn't the goal. It's what you build after surviving that matters. Justice is important, but peace comes from choosing growth over bitterness and using your story to light the way for others still trapped in the dark.